Yeah, Pinot Gris 13. It's going to be awesome. Got to go. Got to have a drink. Bye. Hey, everyone. I can hear the pips going on out in the radio in the other room. I think the dogs have just gone for a walk. It's 5 o'clock and it's time for Drinks with Kate. Welcome. Today, I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone's beautiful food creations, snack creations. I've already seen a couple of things from Angela and a couple of other people, and it's so exciting. And guess what? I forgot to get any food for myself again. Oh well, I'll be okay. So today, for the number 6 of Tasting Box 2, hello Kay, lovely to see you. Hello Jeff. We are tasting a beautiful, mature Pinot Gris. So it's the 2013 Moorooduc Estate Pinot Gris. Now, before I open it, please feel free to open it, put some wine in your glass. It's 5 o'clock, 1 minute past 5. You deserve a glass of wine. But before I open, pocket full of shell, I'm so glad you made the cauliflower cake. I want to see a picture. But don't send it to me until I stop talking because you'll distract me too much. I've turned off all my emails and things, so you guys can take photos and send them through as you like. I shouldn't be pinged by them until I turn everything back on again. So Pinot Gris, why am I so excited about showing you Pinot Gris? Well, partly because I think Pinot Gris is a great variety in Australia that has been much maligned. I think there are, Jeff, you failed with the quiche. Something you can't pronounce. I'll take a photo. I'll have a go at pronouncing it later. But Pinot Gris is a great variety that in Australia has been grown and made for quite a while now. I remember back in the 1990s when I was working in retail, I was very young, obviously, and one of my first opportunities to do some wine judging was as a judge at the Alternative Grape Varieties Wine Show in Mildura. And it was right at the end of the 1990s. It could even have been 2000. But it was an amazing wine show, partly because I drove up to Mildura to do my judging, and it was held at the Grand. And I don't know, for those of you who have been up there, it's a beautiful part of the world, and I highly recommend. I actually think the Grand is a lovely hotel to stay at. It's really old-fashioned, and Stefano De Pieri and his family own the Grand and most of the restaurants in Mildura, and they have an amazing series of restaurants and amazing food, and you can just walk around the block and just eat and walk and eat, and it's fabulous, and drink, of course. But back then, Pinot Gris and Sangiovese were the two grape varieties that were seen as being the most sort of widely planted of the alternative grape varieties. And these days, Pinot Gris is not seen as being alternative at all. A lot of people actually have planted Pinot Gris in Australia and are making it in an attempt to replace Sauvignon Blanc. So the idea for a lot of people is that Pinot Gris is going to be the new Sauvignon Blanc, which I think is a terrible curse to throw at Pinot Gris for a number of reasons. First of all, because no matter how you make it, it's never going to taste like Sauvignon Blanc. So if people like Sauvignon Blanc, then it's just going to be a bit depressing. If you do like Sauvignon Blanc, then you're probably going to keep drinking Sauvignon Blanc. Pinot Gris as a grape variety. So Pinot Gris as a grape variety naturally, when it's fully ripe, has medium acidity, whereas Sauvignon Blanc has naturally very high natural acidity. Sauvignon Blanc smells like gooseberries and tomato bushes, and some people describe it sometimes as cat's pee. Sometimes for me, there's a little bit of underarm aroma. Those are the things I don't like about Sauvignon Blanc, but the things that are lovely about Sauvignon Blanc is that it can be very much like a lemonade icy pole, or it's got all those kind of lovely, bright, acidy, lifted fruitiness. It tastes like almost a summer dessert rather than a wine. And Pinot Gris, you can sort of do that to Pinot Gris if you overcrop it and you pick it early to keep the acid high and you don't allow the flavour to develop, but then it's a bit flat and boring or a bit one-dimensional. At the other end of the scale, Pinot Gris, if you grow it in some places and let it get incredibly ripe, then the sugar levels in those grapes are so high and the flavours are so broad that you either need to stop the ferment before it finishes going through so you have some residual sugar, or you end up with a wine that's maybe 15, 16 plus % alcohol and has a textural quality that can be quite unpleasant. So why am I excited about Pinot Gris? Because I think on the Mornington Peninsula, we grow some of the best Pinot Gris in Australia. I think whether you call it Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio, it's the same grape variety. Pinot Grigio is the Italian name for the variety. Pinot Gris is the French name and the international name for the grape variety. So that's why we call ours Pinot Gris, not because we're trying to make a French style or an Alsace style, but because it's the international name for the variety. So that keeps it nice and simple. The way we make our Pinot Gris, and we had our Devil Bean Creek Pinot Gris earlier on, and we had the Pinot Gris on skins earlier on, but we haven't had the white Pinot Gris yet. So why am I showing you an older version? Hello, Kate, Adrian, and Sarah in West Footscray. Snacks. Yum. Excellent. Good work, team. Oh, yum. That's like a full meal. Huh. The reason that I wanted to show you this aged Pinot Gris is because I think it's pretty sublime. So let's get some in the glass. While I'm pouring, I'm going to tell you how we make it because it's pretty simple. We make it nice, generous pour for a Thursday night. It's cold outside here. I don't know what it's like at your house. It's cold outside. Oh, Richard made me a fire again. There we go. Beautiful little fire, keeping my back warm. Kay, I know you were making the quiche. I hope it all worked out. I'm looking forward to seeing a photograph of that. And Angela's already posted a photo of her quiche on Instagram. So it's all going off. So the way we make our Pinot Gris, first of all, we want to get it nice and ripe because Pinot Gris, when it's ripe, the aromatics of this grape variety are beautiful. It's pear, and it can range from sort of green, crunchy pears through to ripe, yellow, juicy pears. You know those pears that are yellow and they're really ripe so that when you bite into them, the juice goes everywhere and they're sweet and they're delicious. Oh, hi, Angela and Simon and Maria, Tracy and Leon. Awesome. Yay. And so pear, juicy, yellow, sweet, juicy, yellow pear is what we're looking for in our Pinot Gris because that's nice, ripe Pinot Gris characters. It sometimes goes into quince, and it can be just the perfume of ripe quince or the perfume and flavour of almost slow-cooked pot-roasted quince or stewed quince, that lovely perfume that you get. You sometimes get some rose petal aromas, a little bit like Gewürztraminer, and you often get some spicy characters and some honey coming through. And those spicy characters and that honey and that quince aromatic are exaggerated as the wine ages. So let's have a little smell and a little taste and see whether we can see those things. Mine is a little bit too cold because it's cold outside. So I'm just using my hands to warm it up. And I've used one of my narrower glasses today. You could put that into a Pinot Noir glass. I was really not sure which glass I wanted to taste it in. So I just grabbed this because I was running around a little headless chook like a few moments before we went live, but that's okay. So warming it up with my hands. And that's, you know, people say that you have glasses with stems on it so that you don't touch the bowl of the glass and you don't put horrible finger marks all over it. You don't make your wine too warm. But if it's a little bit too cold, then your hands are quite useful, although mine are now very cold as well. So anyway, let's put my hands under my arms to warm them up. So on the nose, I am getting that beautiful yellow pear character, some spice. It's almost a cinnamon spice, a little bit of clove, a little bit of nutmeg there, which is why Mum and I thought that pumpkin in the quince and cheese quiche, that roast pumpkin, which goes beautifully with nutmeg, is a really nice addition to match to an aged Pinot Gris. Anyone who's tasting the wine with the snacks, particularly the quiche or the cauliflower cake, I'd be really interested to know how they go together, if they work well together. Okay, I'm so glad. It's fantastic. Fantastic match or just the wine? You'll have to elaborate on that. So beautiful honey note, yellow pear, that stewed quince character, that spice coming through. It's really rather beautiful. Oh, we've got a dog at the window. Hello, Frodo. Not quite sure what's going on. I'm sure Richard's got that totally under control. Spice, honey, all sorts of delicious things. Then when you put it in your mouth, it's quite savoury, but quite rich as well. Yum. It's nice when you delay the tasting for a little while because it makes it taste so much better when you actually do have a sip. You can feel that quincy fruit coming through. It's got softer acidity than the Chardonnay that we had last week. It's got that honey, but it's not sweet at all. So it's one of those beautiful wines that smells sweet and tastes savoury. And the reason for that is very simple. Because we get that lovely ripeness, you get all those beautiful spices and sweet kind of aromatics, but then we ferment it through to dryness. So we don't want any sugar left in the wine. We want it to be dry. It's about 14% alcohol as a result. So we get it quite ripe, but because it's cool here and we can get the flavour ripeness without the sugar ripeness going out of control, we get that lovely balance. With that time that the wine has spent in bottle, it's just integrated all those flavours, the spices coming forward, the savouriness, the texture of that wine is just so beautiful. Hi, Craig. Great to see you. Gobsmacked. I hope that's in a good way. And Leon, I'm so glad. I think for any of you that haven't had the time or were a bit intimidated by that quiche, I highly recommend when you've got a spare weekend and you've got a bit of time to play around, you do make that because it is such delicious flavours. Now someone's ringing the phone. I'm going to ignore that and hope they go away. So, food and wine. Now, one of the things that a lot of people say to me is, how do you match Pinot Gris and food? Because it's a grape variety that not many people are really understanding of the flavour profile, and also because sometimes it's sweet, sometimes it's not sweet, sometimes it's light, sometimes it's heavy. It's a very confusing. We don't have the sort of the expectation that we understand what Chardonnay matches to, what Pinot Noir matches to. Craig, absolutely with the Taleggio. Taleggio is such beautiful cheese, and again, if you haven't tried Pinot Gris with Taleggio, it's an absolute match made in heaven. And Taleggio's awful with red wine. It's not great with Chardonnay, but it's really fantastic. Shell, I'm so glad that you're saying that. The sesame seeds are the hero with the wine, because sesame seeds, they're little teeny tiny bursts of flavour and they roast up beautifully on the outside of that cauliflower cake, which is super. Penny, it doesn't matter if you haven't got the right bottle. Drink what you feel like. Have a little bit of a vodka and tonic if you can't find a wine, but that's it's such a great thing. And I think that when we show you things that are just released or fresh new wines, then they're lovely and they're refreshing and they're beautiful. But a wine with a little bit of bottle age is so much more interesting as a food wine, I think, because the wine itself has evolved, but then when you put it with the food, it's so fabulous. Angela, you used the Miller King River Gold. That's fantastic. Craig is like throwing expletives out all over the place. I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying. And Kay, I'm sure that the feta would be just as delicious with this wine, because it's a soft cheese. It's got that saltiness. And the sweetness of the quince paste or the membrillo in the quiche would be really beautiful. So a lot of people also say match Pinot Gris to spicy Asian food, and it can work really well there. But I wanted to take us in a different direction tonight with the age on the bottle, and I think this style of wine works so well with sort of Germanic Alsace-style dishes, which is why I went down the quiche, cauliflower, cheesy. And if you've got, if you're still trying to work out what to make for dinner and you've got some cauliflower in the fridge and some cheese, make some mac and cheese. It would go fantastically with this. Make some cauliflower cheese, make a little white sauce, put lots of cheese in it, then drizzle it over whatever vegetables you've got in the fridge that you've cooked up for you, and it will be gorgeous. This is a real sort of soft spicy cheese wine. It goes fabulously also with the, oh, Jeff, that sounds some quince paste on water cracker. Well, that would be delicious. I think you need a little bit of salty something to go with it. But you got what you got. And if you don't have anything, you can just enjoy the wine by itself. And the quince paste actually brings out the quince character in the wine. So I think that's a really nice match too. And it's opening up so beautifully as it warms up, as my hands warm up again, and as I warm it and it warms up and it opens up in the glass. You're getting a little bit more of that sort of caramelized fruit character coming through. It does have a little bit of that aged Riesling character about it, Craig. It's not going down the sort of the lemon and lime marmalade. It's more that quince paste and almost there's a little orange marmalade kind of aromatic about that, as well as the pear. But it's gorgeous. It's got that little lifted almost. There's a non-fruit, non-dairy kind of character, which sometimes with aged Riesling we talk about kerosene or petrol, and it's not quite that, but it's kind of along those same lines. Daryl, Sue, Doug and Di, hi, lovely to see all four of you. Thank you for joining. I hope you've got something nice to eat and something nice to drink, or something nice to drink at least. The other thing that this wine goes very, very well with is pork product, if you're into eating meat. It's fabulous with Italian prosciutto. It's terrific with a pork rillette on toast, if you can ever be bothered making that, or you can find a good one that's been made by someone else. Lovely, spicy, fatty, porky flavours, really, really good. If you're travelling around the Alsace region of France, they love to do like a pork knuckle on sauerkraut, and that sounds pretty full on, but it goes really well with these sort of flavors if you can cope with those rich flavors. Rob, I agree. You're drinking it at a cool room temperature, and I think that's the perfect temperature for this wine. You don't want it too cold because you lose the textural quality and you lose the richness, and some of those nice developed characters just don't show through, whereas as it warms up a little bit on a cold night like tonight here in Moorooduc, it's sort of warm in here because we've got the fire on and the heating's on, but there's still a bit of a chill in the air, and when I go outside it feels like it's about 5 degrees. I think it's probably a bit warmer than that, but on a night like tonight you really don't need to chill it at all. Just drink it at room temperature and just enjoy those sumptuous flavors and aromas. The other thing this goes quite well with actually are Mexican flavours. And I know that sounds a bit weird, but if you think about it, the sweetness of corn, a bit of tomato works quite well with this. Some chili, heat, it works very well with the honeyed character of the wine. You don't want it to be too crazy. You don't want to have too much chili in or too much salsa on your Mexican food. But I've actually found it works quite well with a moderately spicy guacamole and corn chips. So that's another option for you as far as food and wine is concerned. In Alsace, the thing that I did want to tell you about is in Alsace they make these beautiful, they're Alsatian pizzas. They call them tarte flamande, and they're very thin bases with usually sautéed leek or onion, white cheese, sometimes some speck or other type of preserved pig meat, ham of some sort, and then they put them in a really hot oven like a pizza oven and they grill, and so they're all crunchy on the bottom, melty and gooey on the top. Chop them all up. It's like cheese on toast but with a slightly different base and slightly different top. So that works really, really well with this. So think anything cheesy, toasty, pig meaty, richness, deliciousness, creamy, and of course the things that you've already made. Now, everyone, this is the end of a little bit of an era for us tonight. This is our last night for catching up at 5 o'clock. I've had so much feedback from people that they're getting back to work and they're having to travel and they're having to deal with kids going to school and things like that, and they're coming home. after school sports. And, you know, we're sort of looking at what's happening in Melbourne, and we're not doing quite as well as we were with the COVID-19 cases. We've had a few spikes, and, you know, the government's threatening to lock us down again. So who knows? We might go back into lockdown, and we might have to resume our 5 o'clock session, because I don't know, when I'm working from home and in lockdown, I think on Thursday night, 5 o'clock in the afternoon is a good time to stop work and start having a glass of wine. But because many of you are going to have to be, or already are, having to commute home from work, we thought we'd try not Saturdays, what am I talking about? Ignore that. We'll try 6 o'clock rather than 5 o'clock, still on Thursday nights. Thursday night's a good night to get together for a drink. It's not quite Friday, but it's definitely nearly the end of the week. 6 o'clock next week. We've got a new tasting box put together. The new tasting box, I ran out of current release wines to show you because we've been through most of them. And luckily there are a few things that have, you know, just ticked over vintage. So we've got a vintage estate Chardonnay. We've got a new vintage Pinot Gris on skins to taste together, which will be lovely. But because we sort of ran out of current release things that we would normally show at cellar door, I had to get creative. And so what I've done for that box, you may already have noticed, but there's a couple of back vintage things in there. There's a single vineyard Pinot Gris in there from 2012, which will be really interesting to taste in a few weeks' time. The final wine of that box is a beautiful aged Robinson Pinot Noir. And what I wanted to tell you guys is that because you are my precious and special, beautiful tasting group who come and join me every Thursday night, I have thrown those little extra things in. I've kept the tasting box the same price. So you're getting an absolute bargain is really what I'm trying to tell you. Those wines are not always going to be available to buy. In fact, sometimes they'll just be wines that turn up in the tasting box, and we really don't have enough for me to offer you any more of those. If you've already joined the wine club and you've done your login and you've had a look at the wine club behind the login, it's still a little bit sparse, but there are things coming up there of some back vintage wines that only our wine club members can access through that login space. So if you're interested in that and we haven't signed you up to the wine club yet, then get in contact with me or Jeff and we'll talk you through how it happens. Most of you have bought enough wine over the last little while to qualify. And I'm sure we can sort you out for that. If there's anything that we taste over the next 6 weeks that isn't on the normal website shop, just again, give me a call, send me an email. I can let you know then if I've got any available for sale, how much it'll cost, that kind of thing, and we can sort you out because, you know, we're tight now. I think I've pretty much finished. Oh, I didn't even tell you how we make this wine. It's pretty boring, really. We make it the same way as we make the Chardonnay. So we get it ripe, we squash the grapes. The cloudy juice goes straight into barrels, but we use only old oak barrels for Pinot Gris. We don't use any new oak. The wine then goes through a natural fermentation, so we don't add any yeast. The yeast comes in from the vineyards and just exists in the winery anyway. The ferment usually takes somewhere between 5 and 10 days to get started. So obviously we don't fill the barrels all the way up to the top. We leave about 1/5 of the barrel empty so that while it's bubbling away and fermenting, it doesn't come out the top, which can be pretty messy. Once it's finished fermenting, we top those barrels up and we put them away. We don't add any sulfur. We don't add anything at this stage, and we let the barrels sit and do their thing for about 8 months in total. During that time, it usually goes through a malolactic fermentation, which we've talked about before. It's one of those fancy terms that just is talking about changing malic acid, which is the acid that you find in green apples, or in this case, green pears, into lactic acid, which is the acid that you find in milk and cream. You don't get a huge amount of malic acid, particularly in Pinot Gris, so you get a very subtle change, even allowing that to go through 100%. So it'll go through naturally. We don't inoculate for that either. At the end of the 8 months, we'll check the barrels about once a month, and we'll give them a stir just to make sure everything's all nicely mixed up and everything's talking to each other within the barrel. We'll top them up if they've gone down a little bit, because you get a little bit of evaporation in barrels sometimes. And then after about 8 months, we get the wine ready for bottling. And then we do use a little bit of sulphur getting ready for bottling. A lot of people ask me about sulphur, and we haven't really talked about sulphur during these tasting sessions because it's not really that interesting. But what I will tell you is that if you can eat dried fruit, if you can eat commercial potato chips, if you can eat sausages from the supermarket, they've all got more sulphur in them than our wine, and the most handcrafted small artisanal wines have. So a little bit of sulphur at the right time just means that the wine won't turn into vinegar straight away. It's a preservative. It's a fantastic tool used carefully, and without having to add too much. It's not going to be the sulphur in this wine that gives you a headache. It's not drinking a glass of water for every glass of wine that you drink, and it's possibly drinking a little bit too much of that wine and not staying hydrated that's more likely to give you a headache in the morning. I've had terrible trouble giving myself a headache with this wine, so I hope that you don't give yourselves a headache with this wine. You've all got your lovely snacks, got your glass of water, you got your friends to drink your wine with. This wine as well, if you choose not to drink the whole bottle tonight and pop it in the fridge and have it tomorrow, it will have changed, it will have evolved, but it will still be really interesting and still be really nice. So, hi Deb, I'm so glad that you're enjoying it with King Island Double Brie and quince paste. That's good to hear. I think that King Island Double Brie, that creaminess and those tangy, salty flavours are fantastic, and that sweetness of quince paste brings out all of the beautifulness in this wine. On that note, if anyone has any more questions, you better type fast, because I think we're just about done for tonight. It's been lovely. It's been really nice not having any technical difficulties this week. Thank you very much for your patience last week with our technical difficulties. I think this wine is a little bit of a revelation, and I will tell you that we do have a little bit of this wine set aside. So if you do love it, let me know, and we can do you a little deal. We can get a bit of this wine into your cellar, because it's drinking beautifully right now. It's not about to fall off the edge of the world, and it's just going to be a lovely wine to drink with food, a lovely wine to drink with friends, and you will be able to teach people about how fabulous Pinot Gris can be when it's treated with respect and love and care. Kay has asked what we're tasting next week, and I believe the first wine on the list is the 2017 Estate Chardonnay, which is a new release. We're actually still tasting the 16 Estate Chardonnay in Cellar Door, but we're selling the 17 Chardonnay out there in Victoria with our distributors in the few restaurants that have been allowed to reopen in their little way. So 2017 Estate Chardonnay next week, 6 o'clock next week. So don't log in at 5 and wonder where we've gone. It's just a little bit later next week, 6 o'clock next week. I'm so glad that you've enjoyed. Cheers and well done. And well done to Shell and to Kay and to Angela and anybody else who had a crack at Jill's recipes. They're not always the easiest things to cook, and you need to have the time and the patience with them, but they always turn out brilliantly. So thanks very much, everyone. Enjoy your snacks. Enjoy your wine. I'll see you next week at 6 o'clock with some Chardonnay in your glass. Until then, cheers, everyone. Love you all.